assessment functionality in new quizzes. Better questions, better options, we hope. So tonight, my official chat facilitator is Paige Durham, the instructional designer from Germanna Community College. By the way, I'm Terry Milroy. I'm the coordinator of education technologies at Southside Virginia Community College. But also in the chat tonight is Jason Vance from TNCC, Miriam Basinger from Blue Ridge, and Gabriel Scala from John Tyler. So we welcome you all, and if you all will post all of your questions during the presentation in the chat, my friends will be happy to help you. At the end of the presentation, we will give you the opportunity to unmute if you would like to do so. So tonight's agenda is pretty simple. We are going to talk about the increased functionality for question types in new quizzes. We're going to talk about new question types in new quizzes versus legacy quizzes, options in quiz settings that differ from legacy quizzes, and moderating options in new quizzes. Before we get started tonight, though, I do want to mention for those of you who may want to follow along in your sandbox that over the weekend, new quizzes moved to the quizzes navigation area of your sandbox courses or your live courses, either one. So if you are looking to create a new quiz and follow along, please know that that functionality is now under quizzes, not under assignments. So that's new as of Saturday. Okay, so we're going to start with increased functionality in question types of new quizzes. So one of the differences between the legacy quizzes and old quizzes is the ability with a multiple choice question to vary points by answer. So if, for instance, let's say you're doing a math multiple choice question and one of the options is -4 and the correct answer is +4, you might give partial credit to a student for getting basically the correct value, but not the correct positive or negative sign. You also have the ability to lock certain answers in place if you want to shuffle questions. And so let's look at what that looks like. I have here a demo quiz that I have created in new quizzes. So here is one of my multiple choice questions. What character is not pictured here? And if I go to edit this question, then you'll note that my answers are listed here, but I've decided that though Mr. Potato Head is the correct answer of who is not listed, because Jesse was not one of the original characters, I've decided to give my students the option to get 1 point for choosing that versus the 2 characters who've been with us from the beginning. I can also, if I would choose to, lock some of my answers in place. And this is particularly helpful if one of your answers is something like all of the above or both A and B, because you don't want those to shuffle when you shuffle the other answers. So those are particularly helpful additions to your multiple choice questioning. You can also get your vary points by answer by checking this box. And if you click shuffle choices here, you get the lock icons to be able to lock. Okay. Also, in new quizzes, in questions, we have differences in numeric questions, those of you who are math teachers. So the major addition to new quizzes for numeric questions is the addition of margin of error as a requirement. So in addition to within a range, a precise response and an exact response, you now have the option of margin of error. And that allows you to put the answer plus or minus a certain value and to choose a percentage or a absolute value as the difference. You also, of course, have the ability to choose a basic calculator or a scientific calculator, which is the same as legacy quizzes. But in new quizzes, you get this prompt when you enable a calculator to choose to enable one question at a time so that students are only given the calculator for the questions where they need it. So that's a particularly helpful addition, and I'll show you that one as well. So if I click done with my multiple choice, and I go down here to this numeric question, you'll notice that in my statement, I can choose to be an exact response, which I would have to put the answer here, within a range, and then wherever the range start is and the range end, it would have to fall within that exact amount. Or I can do a precise response as well. And you can do that by significant digits or decimal places, any of those. And again, I have the basic calculator enabled, so you'll see Canvas prompts me to turn on enable one question at a time. And that way students who have a calculator need for this question, the calculator will go away if there are other questions where they don't need it. So for your first activity, go into your course and add a new quiz if you don't already have one up. Remember, as of this past weekend, all of your quiz functions are in the quizzes navigation area, not in assignments. Create either a multiple choice or a numeric question using the vary points by answer or lock feature in multiple choice or the requirements feature in the numeric question types. And we'll give you 2 minutes to get that done and go. Okay, we're back. Let me, real quick before we move on, show you guys where to find quizzes in, new quizzes in your course now. This is my white navigation area in my course. If you go to quizzes and click on plus quiz here at the top, it's going to ask you which quiz type you want. Do you want legacy quizzes? That's the old version. Or do you want new quizzes, which we're going over tonight? So if you check that and hit submit, it will start the process of creating a new quiz for you. Okay. So let me go back here and get that loaded. And in the meantime, let's talk about new question types. This is one of the things that I like best about new quizzes. And I know that there is some functionality that people are frustrated with because things don't work exactly the same as legacy quizzes, but we are rapidly approaching the time when legacy quizzes is going to go away. And when new quizzes is no longer an LTI, some of your frustrations with new quizzes will go away. So I want to say that because I know there's some people who are like, but it won't do this or it doesn't do that. The only reason that's true is because it's an LTI for most things right now. Once legacy quizzes goes away, you guys are going to be much happier with this. But there's several new question types in new quizzes. One of those is categorization, where you can set categories of items, for instance, in science class, kingdom, phylum, genus, species, and then list examples of those various things, along with detractors, so that students don't automatically know that everything goes somewhere. There are ordering questions, so that you can tell students, put these elements in the order in which they appear in the periodic table. And you can, the Canvas will mix them up and students will have to drag and drop them into the correct order. You also have stimulus questions, and this is one of the most interesting additions. For those of you who remember the SAT or the ACT, you had lots of, especially in the English portion of those tests, you had lots of questions where there was a big reading selection, maybe there was a graph or something, and then you had multiple choice questions to answer based upon that text selection or that graph or that image. And that's what a stimulus is. You put something in as the stimulus, whether that's a video, a picture, a graph, a text selection, and then you can add as many questions of as many different question types as you want related to that stimulus. And the last question type that is not in legacy quizzes is Hotspot. So this allows you to highlight a portion of an image and have students have to click on the correct area in order to be able to get credit. So nursing particularly likes things like this, for things like, you know, please indicate the left ventricle of the heart. And you highlight that in your hotspot, and if students click in the correct place, then they get credit. So let's look at these question types. So if I go down here to categorization and edit, you can see that I have created two categories for my questions. I'm a political science teacher, so I have, unfortunately, Democrats and Republicans, presidents, because I couldn't think of anything else to categorize. So I've created the Democrats and John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Jimmy Carter, the Republicans, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Dwight D. Eisenhower, but I've also created some distractors, James Monroe and John Quincy Adams, because they were neither Democrats nor Republicans. They were members of parties that no longer exist. So when students see this, they're going to see the categories and they're going to see all of these different options jumbled up, and they're going to have to drag and drop the option to the correct place. You'll note that I can add more answers for each category, and I can add more categories should I want to, or more distractors should I want to. And then if at any time I decide I don't like one of these, I can just trash it and start over. So this is a really neat question type, especially for things like science or like history. Political science is a use, maybe psychology, different psychologists or different, I don't know, different theories. I just think that this is a really cool option for some of our students and for some of our disciplines. Then we have, and you can see what it looks like to students, or that's to you. It'll show you what's correct, and then students will have all of those jumbled up. Then we have the ordering question type. So in the ordering question type, you are giving students a list of information and you are asking them to put that information in a specific order. So for me, as a history and government teacher, I said, place these Civil War battles in chronological order. And I have them here listed in the chronological order. I can choose, note down here, to include labels to make it easier for students. So I said, start with the first Battle of Bull Run or the first Manassas, whatever you want to call that first battle, and finish with Lee's surrender at Appomattox. So you know we're starting at the very beginning and we're ending at the very end. Now put everything in the middle in order. You don't have to include labels if you don't want to, but you could, again, if you were a chemistry teacher, say, put these elements in order as they appear in the periodic table. And you could order them that way. You could put, let's see, you could put psychologists' names in order according to, you know, beginning of the psychology movement to the current time. There's all sorts of ways you could use this. But again, one of my favorites is the stimulus question. And so I have added this wonderful 80s music video compilation and added a multiple choice question over here to the side that says, once you watch the video, then tell me what the second song in the compilation, which is Higher Love, what movie was that in? And just like with any other multiple choice question, I can lock the answers in place if I want to. And if I chose to, I could also vary points by answer. So all of the options that are available to you normally for any question type are available when you attach it to a stimulus. The last of the new question types is Hotspot. And I do, before I go over this, want to remind everyone that Hotspot is the only question type that does not have any way to meet accessibility standards. So if you have students who are differently abled, you may need to either replace hotspot questions or exempt them from hotspot questions because there is no way to make a hotspot question accessible, especially for those who are visually impaired. So there are 3 different shapes that you can use to trace the area that you want to indicate. So I've asked to indicate the location of Ukraine on the map. And I took the pointer for the polygon and I went corner by corner, and you click and drag to the next corner and click and drag to the next corner and click and drag and click and drag until you complete the shape that you're trying to cover. And that allows you to completely fill in the area that you want students to be able to click on. If it's a more uniform shape, you can use the oval for circular and oval shapes. Or if it's a rectangle or a square, you can use the square shape. But some areas are not going to be quite that easy. And so the polygon pointer is the easiest way to indicate your hotspot. And so you can see now what area you've indicated, but students will not see this blue highlighted area when they see the question. Okay. So for our next activity, in your demo quiz, if you're doing one and following along, add at least 2 of the following quiz type or question types: the categorization, the ordering, the stimulus, or the hotspot, and come back to us in 2 minutes. Good luck. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. We are back now, and we are going to move on and talk about quiz settings. So quiz settings have several different setting options than legacy quizzes. One of those is to allow multiple attempts and require wait time between those attempts. And the other is the way student results after the time that the test is over. So one of the things that we want to make sure that is understood tonight is, in addition to hiding grades in the Grade Center, you can eliminate student access to their questions and answers by turning on the Restrict Student Result View. Leaving the item on with no boxes checked underneath it will mean that students see a submission confirmation, but nothing else. Even if they click on the item in their grades, they will not be able to see any of the questions or their own or any correct answers. Okay, so if you want them to see anything other than a submission confirmation and their grade, once their grade is posted, then you need to make sure that you check other boxes or turn this off. So let's look at this in Canvas. So I have my whole fake quiz here, and I want to go to settings and decide how I'm going to set this up. I can choose to shuffle questions so that they appear in a different order. I can globally shuffle answers. So this means that every single question in the entire test that has a multiple answer type will be shuffled. I can turn on one question at a time showing and allow backtracking or not. So if I unclick that, that prevents them from backtracking. Just like in legacy quizzes, you can require a student access code, a time limit, and just as a reminder, time limits in Canvas are a hard time limit. In Blackboard, students could continue to submit regularly and get 10 minutes or so extra on a quiz if they were submitting fast enough. In Canvas, it is a 10-second past the time limit hard cutoff. So just remember that if you decide to set a time limit, you are seriously limiting your students. So if you would be flexible within 5 minutes, add 5 minutes to that time. You can filter IP addresses just like you can in legacy quizzes. And if you're not familiar with this, this is something that my nurses in particular use a lot because they are required to be present when their students take their tests, but they don't want their students to be able to take the test at home. So by putting in IP addresses for the computer labs on our various campuses, they're able to make sure that a student doesn't call in sick and then try to take the test from home where they have more options to help themselves along on the test. You can turn on a calculator globally for the test, and you get the choice of basic or scientific. But here's one of the new features that I really like. Allow multiple attempts, just as with legacy quizzes. You can take the highest attempt, the average of all the attempts, or the last attempt that was made. You can allow unlimited attempts, or you can limit to a finite number. But what I really like is the waiting period between attempts. Because one of the things that I've found to be true, even with some faculty, no offense, is that if you tell them they need to take a quiz and they don't pass the first time, they immediately start the quiz over again. And they might not take the opportunity to go back and look. So we want our students to go back and do some studying before they take it again most of the time. So if you require a time between attempts, you can choose days, hours, and or minutes between attempts so that students are forced to go back and consider what they learned before they take it again. And again, this last restrict student result view, if this is turned off, then as soon as you start grading things, students are going to be able to see the questions, their answers, and their grade. If you turn this on, then without any of these other boxes checked, all students see is a submission confirmation. Even if they go into grades and click on the name of the test, which would normally allow them to see their question and their answer. But it will not allow them to do that if this is turned on. You can choose then to show the points awarded overall and per question. You can then show the points possible overall and per question so they can see, you know, here's all of the questions. You got 5 out of 6 on this one and 8 out of 10 on this one. Then you can choose whether to show the items and the questions. And just the way this one displays itself is different from legacy quizzes, because once you say show items and questions, you then have to choose whether or not to show the student's response. And only if you select that do you get to say yes and indicate whether that was correct or incorrect. And then if you show correct or incorrect, then you get the choice to show the correct answer with the incorrect response. but all of these are positive choices. They are not the default. So just be aware of that as you go through and set this up for your tests. Show item feedback is available to you as soon as items and questions are shown. And item feedback are those, good job if you get it right, or you might want to go back and reread chapter 2 if students get it wrong. All right. So your next activity. In your demo quiz, change your settings for shuffling answers, student attempts, and restricting student view. This should be a fairly quick one, but we'll give you 2 minutes. So go ahead and go. Okay, we are back again. Before we talk about quiz moderation, which is our last agenda item for tonight, I do want to return to modules for a minute and point something out to you. Until this Saturday, new quizzes in modules were indicated with a paper with a pencil icon. Since the change on Saturday, new quizzes are now indicated in modules by a solid green airplane, whereas the legacy quizzes are an outline of a rocket ship. So they look much more similar now, but the solid green is new, the outline is old, if that is helpful. So the last thing we're going to talk about tonight is quiz moderation. And this is one of the things that causes the most heartburn for my faculty. There's been a lot of improvements to new quizzes moderation over the last couple of months. So I did want to make mention of some of the new functionality in quiz moderation. So this is a screenshot of a moderation page where there are actually students enrolled. Accommodations, which is this column next to last on the screenshot, apply to all assessments within the course. So just note that wherever you give an accommodation to a student, that's going to apply to every quiz and test in that course, whether that's your intention or not. So if you have a student with learning disabilities or with special needs, and you need to give them additional time or additional attempts, and that needs to be a regular practice because of accommodations that your disability service offices have requested, then you make that change here in the accommodations column. You can give additional time. You can remove time limits entirely for that child or that student if you need to do that. And you can also do a time limit multiplier. This is much easier than giving additional time, because if you were to say on this particular quiz, I want to give this student 30 extra minutes. Well, maybe this test is 60 minutes long, so that gives the student 90 minutes. But what about on your final exam? If they have 90 minutes already for that test and you add 30, is that supposed to be 30 additional minutes, or were they supposed to have 50% more time? So if you want to do a time multiplier, that multiplies the same percentage for every time limit, regardless of what it is, and you don't have to go in and manipulate it. The moderate button over here to the far right of the moderation screen applies only to the current assessment that you're in. And it again allows an additional attempt, gives additional time, and removes the time limit only for this particular assessment. This is particularly helpful and wasn't present a year ago when we first started looking at Canvas. Let's say students have a power outage or a glitch and their laptop crashes in the middle of their test, or they have a power surge and the quiz blips out and submits, and there are only 2 questions into a 30-question test. This allows you to go in and either give additional time because the student was locked out, or remove the time limit for them, okay? So that's particularly helpful to allow students to finish things that might not otherwise have been their fault. As with old quizzes moderation, it will show you the number of attempts, and you can click on the hyperlink for any of the attempts listed for each student. It will tell you their score for that attempt and the amount of time that they spent on the attempt in total. It will also allow you to click on the log. The log is going to show you minute by minute what question the student submitted, what time they started the test, and exactly what time they submitted the test. However, occasionally you will find, right now, because this is an LTI, that the submission time on the log and the submission time in the grade center, being late or on time, don't agree with one another. You should always accept the grade center time over the log, because sometimes it takes a couple of minutes for the log to finish processing. So if you ever do notice that, then be sure that you know that whatever the grade center says is more correct than whatever the log says. Yeah, and if you use availability dates with times in quiz moderation, availability time trumps the moderation. So if you go into, let me show you. If you go into your quiz, oops, I've done that wrong. Let me go back. If I go here to edit and, oh shoot, it's not gonna allow me to do that. When you create your quiz, let me do another one. Sorry, everything is messed up tonight. Okay, so if I go here and I'm gonna create a new quiz. If down here in the assign box, if I say available from next Monday at midnight at 12 a.m. until Friday, Monday, and then it's available until Friday at 11:59, then that availability date is going to trump any additional time in your moderation area. So just be aware that if you set these available from and available until dates, it is going to interfere with any moderation that you have put forward for your students. Also know that the available from and the available until dates do not override the student's ability to click on the item in their grade center and see the questions and answers. So if you want to prevent students from seeing the questions and their answers on the test, after this available until date, you do have to either hide grades or turn on that restrict student result view that we showed in the last area. Okay, we found this out the hard way. Availability dates do trump moderation, but they do not trump the policy to post grades. Okay, so you do need to be aware of that. All right, let me cancel and go back here So very simply, for activity number 4, you have no students taking your quiz. So if you want a minute, I probably won't give you the whole 2 minutes, but if you want a minute to review the documentation on moderating new quizzes, you can click on the link that is on the slide in front of you and take a look. Or if you have a new quiz that you are actually working on in a live course shell, you can go in and look at the moderate page there. And I'll probably just give you about a minute here. So go ahead and go.
Can you put that link in the chat? It's easier to click that way.
Okay, since we started the timer late, I think that's been about a minute and a half. So you all, that link is again on the resources page at the end of the slides, and you will have access to all of the slide deck on the edtech.vccs.edu page. So to conclude tonight, we have covered how existing question types function differently in new quizzes than in legacy quizzes, viewed the new question types unique to new quizzes. We reviewed the settings options that differ in the new quizzes from legacy, and we reviewed documentation on how to moderate new quizzes. All of the Canvas information about the new question types, about settings, and about moderation are all on this page right here. As always, we hope that you will take a moment to fill out our survey. Let us know how we did. We do look at your survey information so that we can know how we can better serve you all going forward. And we want to thank you all so much for coming tonight. And if there are any additional questions now, you can unmute and I will do my best to help.
So I'm going to answer some questions. This is Paige. So if the feature is not turned on by your institution, then yes. If you see it in the settings and you go over to feature options and you do not see the green toggle next to new quizzes being on, then yes, you have the ability to turn that on. If you don't see it, then you will have to talk to your Canvas admin. The one thing I did want to make sure that everybody understood is currently the Respondus Lockdown browser, new quizzes does not work. So if you require students to use Respondus in the testing center or anywhere else, then new quizzes cannot be used right now with that.
That is true. And thank you for saying that. We think maybe Respondus may be able to work once new quizzes is not an LTI, but that has not been confirmed by Canvas yet.
and they can't, then they do not, Canvas and Respondus right now are not sure how to fix the problem.
Yeah.
So just make sure that if you are, that is a requirement that you have, that you stay with classic quizzes.
Yes,
So
everyone will have access to this.
I put a link in the chat area to what is an LTI. It is an external tool that Canvas uses so that they don't have to provide every single thing that every single institution wants. So it is something that is basically an add-on to Canvas.
Right. Yes, the PowerPoint, the slides will be available to everyone. They should be posted on edtech.bccs.edu within the next 48 hours.
And one final thing about new quizzes and your password. So you can password protect the quiz. However, if you are sitting in the testing center and the student goes in and the testing person has to go over and type in the password is not encrypted. So if the student is standing there watching, they will be able to see what the password is for new quizzes.
Yes, so if you're going to use a password, it really is just to keep students out of it until you're ready for them to take it. Either that or the testing center needs to set up a test before the student is allowed to sit down at a computer. Anybody else? Thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate your attendance, and I hope you guys have a great night.